Good morning. It's October 2nd, 2020, and this is the OSU Turfgrass Team Times. Online, you have the follicularly challenged Ed Nangle, Dave Shetler, and Joe Rimmelsbach. You've also got Dave Gardner, Carl Danneberger, and Pam Schratt with a full head of hair. Today, as we start to finally get to a cool down period and we head into winter, most of you are probably thinking about getting ready for winter and also next spring. And also probably surveying damage from the summer we just went through. Um, it's for most people being probably the roughest summer we've seen since 2012, particularly on the temperature end of it. Moisture has not been a massive contributing factor, so we've probably avoided some of the problems. But temperature-wise, we definitely did hit some peaks that had not been seen for a while. From that standpoint, we did have turf grasses that were stressed and leaving voids. And when we've got voids in turf grass stands, we have weeds. To that end, the expert is Dave Gardner.
Good morning, everybody. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about weed control. And they don't look like this right now, right? Some of our winter annual weeds like henbit and chickweed, they're tiny little 1 and 2 leaf seedlings at this point, or maybe they haven't even emerged yet, but chances are you're starting to see some germination of the winter annual broadleaf weeds. And it's in the spring that we find out that these are really, really difficult to control with post-emergence herbicides. Hardening off over winter makes these quite resistant to a lot of the herbicides that we use. Now, I have a big problem with these on my property, and so I threw down a pre-emergence herbicide recently. And again, if you don't see them yet, put it out as soon as you can. Any of the pre-emergence herbicides that we use for crabgrass on areas where you had severe winter annual broadleaf weeds this spring, that's probably the best strategy. But if it's too late, then know that using a post-emergence herbicide late October, early November is going to be better than attempting to control post-emergence next spring. Anybody that had an issue with winter annual broadleaf weeds probably learned that the hard way, that they can be really difficult to control post-emergence. At the same time that you're trying to control those winter annual broadleaf seedlings, you can also take out the perennial broadleaf weeds, so things like dandelion, white clover, wild violet. There's actually a lot of them. Okay, so the challenge is to remember which ones are perennials and which ones are summer annuals, because there is still things like pigweed and spurge out there. There's no point in spraying those now. The herbicide isn't going to work particularly well, and it's going to die after the first frost anyway. But it's these weeds, the perennial broadleaf weeds, that you're going to really want to pay attention to: the dandelion, the white clover, etc. Question came up: why was white clover so ridiculously competitive this year? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is somewhat more drought tolerant. Kind of like the warm season grasses are somewhat more drought tolerant, and so it just had more of a competitive advantage against the cool season grasses. But yeah, white clover was a significant issue this year. And again, anywhere that you see it now is the time to go ahead and try to get rid of it. This flies in the face of what we usually think of. It's business practices versus agronomic principles. If you're a lawn care company, it's not like you knock on somebody's door in April and say, hey, I noticed that you have some dandelions. Let me come back and take care of those for you in November, right? It's not a good way to get business. And so we control them in the spring. The thing is that those herbicides, they do pretty good on the top growth, but usually those weeds will come back. Okay, whereas if you spray with the right types of herbicides in the fall, you can actually get more effective long-term control, because you get better translocation of the herbicide through all of those structures that make the perennial weed a perennial. There's some other side benefits, like you're less likely to accidentally cause curling damage to your maples and other ornamentals in the landscape and your garden plants and things like that. But then you also have that side benefit of the winter annual weeds that I just talked about are controlled with that herbicide application to target the perennial broadleaf weeds. So again, the key thing is to use the right kind of herbicide. There's a couple of clues on the label. If you look at the if you look at the active ingredients, it will usually say something like 2,4-D, isooctyl ester, or 2,4-D, an amine formulation. Also, if you use the signal word, this is a generalization now, but usually if the signal word is danger, it's the amine formulation. If it's caution, it's the ester formulation. That's due more to the eye splash hazard than the inherent toxicity of the product, but a couple of clues that will guide you towards whether it's the amine or the ester formulation. Just know that, and this is springtime data, so we have to use our imaginations and go in reverse here, but my point with this is that the later into the fall that we go, the more effective the ester formulation is going to be, just like it was more effective earlier in the spring. So maybe this is the more relevant slide. Amine formulations work comparatively well in warmer temperatures, but in cooler temperatures, they start to be not as effective. And so you're going to really want to make sure that you're using that ester formulation of the herbicide in order to optimize the chances of getting good control of your broadleaf weeds this fall. And again, this can work very, very well. This is a horrible example because it's a common chickweed. But just to illustrate, it's not a perennial broadleaf weed is my point, but just to illustrate that I applied this herbicide on November 21st. It was 41 degrees, it was misting lightly. And you see that on the 5th of December, the weed is basically obliterated. You know, in the summertime when you spray, sometimes you don't get good control because the herbicide will volatilize off of the leaf before it translocates into the plant. If you spray in the right conditions, you can actually get much better translocation. And so I'm not saying you should go out on the 21st of November when it's foggy or misty out, but the point is that if you're using those ester formulations, you can control weeds in October or even the first part of November, so long as soil temperatures and air temperatures are sufficiently high. So here's an area that I sprayed again. It was in November, and you see the green grass. That was where I had done a herbicide trial. And you see all of the blooming dandelion and clover around it. And this area basically stayed weed free for much of the rest of the year. Again, more translocation, giving more permanent control of those perennial weeds. So Ed, that's what I have for this week.
I have a question, please, Dave.
What you got?
Since Bermuda grass and Nimblewill are still green, would it be an opportunity right now for people to control those non-selectively or not?
If Nimblewill and Bermuda grass are still green, you could attempt a non-selective herbicide, but I would anticipate that it's going to be starting to be not as efficient, the translocation and the control here pretty soon. Remember, when they're totally dormant, you can basically apply those herbicides safely over the top, you know. And so, yeah, if they still have green on them, they can make the attempt, but they need to hurry.
And Poa trivialis?
Same thing, as long as you've got green tissue.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. All right, for those of you who are in the depths of despair over your damage from insects over the summer, Dr. David Shetler is here to commiserate with you.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I'm still getting reports. People are finally realizing we've had this cool weather and some rain fronts have come through, and grass isn't recovering. So now they get out of their truck and they go over to the lawn and check it out. Many of those dead spots are easily pulled up, and in some cases you can still see the damage from bill bugs. You'll still see the hollow stems. And you can still see some of the frass pellets in those stems from all the way back in last June when those bill bugs were active. We are seeing in certain areas also a second generation of bill bugs that seem to have done its thing in August, and that damage is there also. And so, you know, I'm getting, the bug doc's getting questions about reseeding at this time, and I'll let some other people talk about that, but it's really getting pretty late. They're talking about this weekend of having some widespread frost across the state, and that's pretty well going to shut down with the cool temperatures and so forth. When it comes to white grubs are still pretty much AWOL over most of the state. They're still there. There's a few heavy spots, and the skunks and raccoons are finding them, but what we've experienced in the past with some widespread grub damage just doesn't seem to be appearing this year. That's personally damaging to me. I've got 2 trials that I've got to rate next week, and I know one trial doesn't have any grubs in it, so I'm just going to have to tell the sponsor, sorry, we didn't get any grubs. And the other one, I'm seeing some patchy raccoon activity in that particular plot, and I've got my fingers crossed that there'll be enough grubs in there to get a rating of some late season grub insecticides, but they're probably going to be fairly low. So I think you escaped this year for most of you. If you haven't had reports of grub damage, you're probably not going to have it, but that doesn't mean that next year that you can eliminate your grub treatments. We still need to be thinking about that. That's all I've got, Ed.
Thanks, Dave. We won't sing the last rites on it completely then. All right. Next up is Pam Schratt and Sports Turf.
Thank you, Ed. So just a couple of things. Wanted to talk a little bit about just continuing to do some of those practices in the fall. Still a lot of sports turf managers out there doing thatch and organic control on the sand fields. Try and keep those surfaces clean going into the winter. Continuing into drag in fields on softball and baseball fields again, because as Dr. Gardner said, those winter annuals come in and they will infest infields very quickly if you don't continue to drag them. Top dressing and aeration practices continuing if you are lucky enough to have the budget and the manpower to be on a sand top dressing program. It's one of the things that you can do going into the winter months to make sure that you're not subject to desiccation. The crowns are protected. It can help significantly with that fall seeding. Doing the 3 together, fall seeding, fertilization, and top dressing is kind of like the perfect combination of putting the field to bed at the end of the year for the best success next spring. And then extending the time. I know we're right on the edge. I just seeded this week, actually. I seeded this week heavy on perennial ryegrass because I know at this time of year I'm probably not going to get much success with Kentucky bluegrass, but I just did a broadcast and raked in heavy perennial ryegrass, some bluegrass, and a little bit of fine fescue, and expecting it to pop hopefully by Sunday. You can extend that a little tiny bit if you invest in growth covers. So, I mean, there are plenty of companies out there that will sell you growth blankets or growth covers. Ryan sent me a link this week to a company that sells, it's a greenhouse company that sells row crop covers actually, and they're really inexpensive. So if you have goalmouth areas, linesman runs on soccer fields, lacrosse goals, like anything like that small, you can pick up these growth blankets from non-traditional means, i.e. greenhouse, row crop people, for as little as $30. And you can extend the greening and the seed establishment period by a couple of weeks doing that. So as long as we don't get a real hard frost in the next couple of weeks, which we typically do get frost around the 3rd, 4th week of October, but as long as it's not too bad, I think you could extend that by using those covers. So that's kind of all I had. I can't reiterate enough really the importance of doing things now to make sure that your fields are ready to go for spring, especially if you've got spring sports. So if you've got the time and the manpower, that put as much as you can into it right now.
Thanks, Pam. Okay, the man with the fine salt and pepper beard, we'll give him still some black hair. Joe Rimmelsbach on the disease front.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. And I don't have a lot. Of course, by this time of year, most of the diseases are pretty much winding down. On high cut or athletic fields, there may be some lingering rust. Different spots have had quite a bit of rust. And like I've always mentioned, I've never seen this to be a killer. It's more of a nuisance problem. And with rain and cooler temperatures, hopefully we'll get good recovery from those. Right after our last video 2 weeks ago, I did get several samples to confirm gray leaf spot on ryegrass on athletic fields, college, high school athletic fields, a lot of ryegrass. It wasn't extensive, it wasn't widespread, but they did want to confirm it just so they can keep tabs on it. And I'm sure that has dissipated and really has ceased its really damage with these cooler temperatures like we're having now. On the golf side, it's fairly quiet. Again, kind of right at the time of our last video, there was kind of a little blip or where the dollar spot really kind of flared up because of rain and the temperatures. That's kind of settled down now. If you have areas that were heavily damaged during the Earth dollar spot, especially bents with these cooler temperatures, I'll let other people talk about, but their growth seems to really be slowing down. So recovery may be not as complete or as you'd like. So you have to kind of just plan to have good agronomic practices to maintain health in that turf, and so that it'll go into winter as best it can. And then be aware of this, so next spring, if you want to manage dollar spot, you're ahead of the game. Again, pre-symptom applications would be something to consider. The only last thing I'd like to mention is thank everyone that participated in the OTF golf outing this week. We really appreciate your support and continue to that in these kind of weird COVID times. So thank everyone that supported that and participated. So that's all I have, Ed.
Awesome, Joe. One follow-up question. I've seen mildew starting to show up on shaded areas in the home lawns, right? That's going to be an ongoing problem for the next month, 6 weeks probably.
Yeah, that could linger on, mainly on bluegrass. It's
Not
kind
major
of
concern.
a nuisance thing. It's kind of not going to really, again, kind of like rust. I don't think I've ever seen grass killed by powdery mildew. It's more of a nuisance thing. But yes, with shorter days, moist, cool nights, and cool periods, high humidity, it could really take off.
Right, but not a nuisance, not a killer.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, speaking of not being killed, Dr. Karl Danneberger, the COVID survivor.
Yeah, I guess that's my talk at OTF. I found out 10 minutes ago. So be sure to look forward to that. One quick question for Joe. Just looking to the future here for the top 1/3 of the state of Ohio. What about roughly when do they start looking to spray for snow mold in northeastern Ohio? Just what's the?
That's a good question, Carl. You know, the old saying, old people like us is, you know, basically they'd make their application of snow mold on the golf course, and then they'd come to OTF. So it's usually just, you know, late November, early December. Of course, you know, snow molds have really backed off considerably. Again, I would look at more November, later November. You have to kind of look at the extended forecast, see if we happen to have a warm up, an extended warm period into the fall. It gives you some more time. But, you know, that late November, December time frame and kind of logistically, I guess, you know, asking you, you know, right now I'm hearing, you know, there's still heavy use of golf courses, public golf courses. That continues to move on. And probably will continue on. So, you know, they have to work around play and what all that means. And with warmer weather, that may extend quite a while. So I would still say maybe target December is kind of my best guess. And then depending on the way this winter progresses, is if you've had history of it or severe problems, you may need a second app in maybe January, February, depending on the year and the snow cover and all those factors. So I don't know if that really helps very much, but kind of the traditional time frame.
Yeah. That's a good lead in for me. Yeah, not to tell stories, but I've been fortunate. I've been out playing golf the last probably about 3 or 4 weekends. And usually the public courses around south of Columbus and also around Marysville and places like that. And the thing I noticed, and I've come to the conclusion, football has a big impact since I've been playing on Saturdays and Sundays, is these courses are jam-packed. I mean, get a tee time, you got to book it like Wednesday. And people are playing from early in the morning through the day. So that's been good, obviously, for courses from a financial perspective. So you know, the delay in football, especially with Buckeye football, I think's had an impact. Plus, people, there's not a whole lot else you can do outside but play golf. What I've noticed too, though, is the courses have been in great shape. The ones I've played, and the thing is, usually you would go on to greens about this time playing, and you see aerification holes, coring holes, and nobody's on high play golf courses. I'm not going to say nobody, but coring continues to be pushed further back, and I can understand why. When you have people lined up to play, you want to keep it going. So for those that have been pushing it off, and then once you start, related to what Pam said, the later you go, the slower it is for those holes to recover. And you'll see that up here come early spring too. So my only suggestion there is to top dress heavy. So you fill the holes as much as you can, make it as smooth as you can. You know, you know, what Joe said, I think as long, and it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend with it being a little cooler, but I think people are going to play as late as they can, and it's going to be a lot higher than we've normally seen. And that's, you know, that's an amateur view of golf, but that's the big thing there. I agree with Pam. Seeding, we're getting in with Dave, we're getting toward the end of the seeding season. You can still sod, you know, those areas, sod up till the ground's frozen. Roots will grow or root even at as temperatures approach or soil temperatures approach freezing. Once it hits freezing, they'll stop. So focus in on that. If I were to seed right now, you know, do everything you normally do, put down a starter fertilizer with it, and then hope for the best. Any questions?
Why is the sky blue, Carl? Okay, we will leave it.
Rise in the east. So I don't
We will leave it with that one last thing. We have the ATI scholarship outing is coming up on the 16th of this month at Columbia Hills. It's a 2-team event with 2 captains. Zane is one captain, I'm the other captain. And the idea is the losing captain goes in the dunk tank. If you go to Buckeye Funder, and that will occur at the end of October, if you go to Buckeye Funder on the OSU website, there's an opportunity there to find the ATI Turfgrass Scholarship. And we're aiming to hit about $10,000. It makes a critical difference to our students, and in particular this year, it definitely does make a difference. The one other thing, following up on the lawn and seeding, the YouTube page for the Turfgrass Management Program at OSU has a series of videos from Dr. Rodenbush going through all of the steps for the actual process of doing your home lawn. So as much as we tend to talk about the problems and solving them, the how-to part can be missing. So that video goes through each step in depth and is extremely high quality content. With that, we will leave it. We will probably have one more of these vital news information pieces for those Turfgrass managers towards the end of the month, and that will be it. Again, keep an eye out for OTF and the conference. You will have seen that the dates for the live event have moved to early January of 2021. There will be pre-recorded content available, we would expect in mid-December. Thank you, and talk to you all soon. Stay safe, folks.